From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
Well, of course, we are in the season of Christmas, and so we are recognizing and celebrating the birth of Jesus and tremendous impact that he had on our world and continues to have as we awaken to his teachings and his principles and apply them. He was one who walked the earth as a man like us, but he also modeled a way of being that was really what I like to refer to as another level of spiritual frequency or vibration that was truly of God. It was of oneness. It was a recognition of his divinity, the divinity of God that was within him. And his mission included to make us aware of and awaken us to the existence of this dimension of God that dwells within every one of us. That sacred something that is of God inherent in each of us. And we call that divine dimension the Christ, okay? And many forget that this is really the essence of what Christmas is really about. One of the major teachings of Christmas, in my estimation, is realizing that we celebrate the birth of Jesus who walked the earth, but we also celebrate what he brought forth, what he modeled, what he expressed, this dimension of connectedness and oneness and attunement to God that he sought to bring us into when he said, "Follow me." And so we've gone through many Christmases, many of us, and yet each one, I think, can be new. Each one can be more powerful and more meaningful as we open ourselves and allow ourselves to get the essence of really what the Christmas message is intended to be. We are supposed to be growing, unfolding, evolving spiritual beings. Hopefully we all agree with that. And so I think that, Christmas is about moving into higher dimensions of what we refer to as Christ consciousness, the consciousness that Jesus brought forth. Now, that isn't necessarily what Christmas always seems to bring to the forefront in the experience of every individual, of course. For many, Christmas can bring a certain amount of stress. There's often an added long list of to-dos that is part of our life. And there are cards to be sent, there are gifts to buy, there are decorations to put up, there's travel arrangements if we're traveling, there are meals to plan as we have various people joining us and relatives and what have you. There are all sorts of preparations that go with Christmas, and it's all kind of the external stuff. And some people allow themselves to get kind of uptight. Anyone here a little bit uptight about it? You wouldn't admit to it. But I want to tell you about an experience I had just a few years ago. It was nearing Christmas, and I was going to visit a congregant in the hospital. And I got a real early start, and I arrived at the hospital at about 7:30 a.m. in the morning. And so I'd had some coffee to drink and so forth, so I went directly to the restroom on the first floor. Now, what you need to know is that the configuration of that restroom was such that you went through the door, then you made a left turn, and you went down about 10 feet and made a right turn, and then you opened up to seeing the sinks and the rest of what was the men's lavatory. And so anyway, once I was done in there, I was heading on out, and I was coming around that wall. And I was heading around the wall, and I hadn't heard anybody coming in, and this person didn't hear me being in there, and all of a sudden there was a person, and he was kind of in a hurry, it seemed, and we met right at that wall. And it was a startling kind of experience. And what this guy did was, really, he raised his hand in a clenched fist. He was gonna nail me. And he was kind of a husky dude, and fortunately, he held back from striking me. And with that pose, he was just kind of like a statue then. And then he smiled. Because he realized, actually, in that moment, I intuitively sensed, wow, I'm really wound tight. It's Christmas, I'm in a hospital. But anyway, he was embarrassed. He apologized, actually. And I noticed that he had a big packet of keys that was attached to his belt. He also had a two-way walkie-talkie. And I realized that he was actually security of some sort for the hospital. So anyway, I went to get the information as to where exactly this person was, what floor and what room. And then as I was heading to the elevators, I encountered him again. He went out of his way to apologize and say, "Can I help you find the correct elevators? Anything I can do?" And it's fine. But it was interesting to see how wound tight a person can really be. But the point is that we can become really overstressed with the different things that are happening or we're engaged in externally in life. And we may react in ways that we don't mean to. So we need to find a way to just kind of cool our jets a little bit as we're going through the experience. And of course, we don't all get all wound that tight. But I find that most people really do enjoy Christmas. I love Christmas, and I know it adds some to-dos and things, but some people really get into the joy of the sending the cards and the setting cards and getting decorations set up and just finding the right gift for the right person. There's a connection that is being made. It can be a joyful experience, but some do get stressed with the cooking and the cleaning and the shopping and what have you. And I do have a story to tell you about shopping. Not everybody likes to go shopping. A lot of times men don't like to go shopping, as they're overly generalized. Not all. But anyway, there was some people that were neighbors, and this was about Christmas time, and they had developed a really good relationship as neighbors, and they became buddies, really, both the husbands and the wives. And so the wives, it was a Saturday, about, I don't know, 6-7 days before Christmas, and the wives decided they were getting together and they were going to go shopping. They asked their husbands, and their husbands said no. And we're going to do something else. And one of them, actually, of the neighbors, had a sailboat. And they said, it's Saturday, we're going to go out sailing. So that's what they did. And they went sailing, and what happened was that a big storm came up, and it got very, very rough. And they were having difficulty maneuvering the sailboat back to shore. And they ended up, hitting a sandbar, and they were grounded in all kinds of mud and silt and so forth. And so both men had to jump off the sailboat and try and dislodge it. So they're up to their waist or chest in water. It's cold. They're up to their knees in muck and silt. And they're dealing with the wind and the big waves that are hitting the boat and hitting them and blowing on them. And there's chill in the air. And it's not a pleasant experience that they're dealing with as they're trying to free the boat. And at some point, one of the guys looked at his friend across the other side of the boat and caught his eyes. And he said, "Sure beats Christmas shopping, doesn't it?" Oh man, I love that story. So there are some outer things that we may not love to do in regard to Christmas, but spiritually there is a message in it that we most certainly are meant to embrace, not turn away from or forget. It's a very holy kind of experience that beyond the externals of Christmas, we need to go internally and experience at a heart level, at a soul level, at a being level. And Christmas exists for a reason, beyond and inclusive of the celebration of the birth of the babe was, again, what followed. And so Unity teaches that the name that was given is Christ. And so there's supposed to be a shift that takes place. We are to be, Christmas is about bringing out the best in us. And what is the best in us? But it is God in us. And so the name that we give to that God in us is Christ. Jesus was the man, the person that walked this earth, this God, as we all are sons and daughters of the Most High God. And but within him was this divinity, this part of him that was of God that we call Christ, Jesus the Christ. And there are some things that the Apostle Paul said. There are Bible passages that have to do with the idea that we all have this Christ within. And the Apostle Paul, he had a shift. And he was on the road to Damascus, and he was really opposed Jesus in many ways, persecuting Jesus and what have you. And he had this tremendous experience of the light coming on and experiencing Jesus, and a total shift. And with it came a sense of awakening where he got clear. He got clear, and he got clarity on who he was, his relationship to God, what Jesus was really about and passing along to us in the way of a message. And so there's a lot of writings that are there in the Bible that we can read and we ought to take heed of and not ignore. And one of them that we like to share that is, I love, it's my favorite, I go to again and again, is where he said, you know, the mystery which has been hidden for ages and generations is Christ in you, your hope of glory. That's very powerful. So he was saying now, it's not just about Jesus having the Christ in him, but every person has the Christ in them, but Jesus modeled it. We're not saying you're there. We're not saying you're living it completely, or you're in some stage of development and unfoldment of fulfilling the perfect idea that you are held to be in the mind of God, and through your own personal will, linking up with the will of God, you, bit by bit, stage by stage, begin to broaden and deepen the truth of who you are and its expression. And so that was one passage, and then there was another passage where, you know, he says, we are children of God, he said, and if children, then heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. And so in a sense, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all heirs of the one source, the one creator, the one light that is the divine, that Christ Spirit is in us all. Also in Galatians, where it says, Paul saying, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. And he's saying, get beyond form, and within the realm of the formless you know, that is not temporal, but eternal, you're all one. There's very powerful things to make note of. He also said, all who follow the Spirit of God are sons of God. So again, back to the idea that some say there's only one Son of God, but Paul was saying, well, wait a minute here now. All who follow that Spirit, like Jesus did, actually bring out the Son of God in them into expression. That's the path we're to be on. We talk about the only begotten Son, but many a master and seer and teacher have said that the only begotten is referring to the only begotten of God that is in every person. So there is the only, that of you, which is the Son of God, which is the only begotten of God. And that's what we're seeking to bring forth into expression. And so what we know is this. We know that Jesus was born 2,000 plus years ago. However, Christ had, the Christ has always been in existence. Even prior to the birth of Jesus in the crib, Christ existed. Because Christ is a level of stature, it's a level of consciousness that represents absolute oneness with the divine. And there are those who are some masters and mystics who would say that there are some others who preceded Jesus that actually stepped into some dimension of that level of oneness with the divine. And they may argue that Krishna did, or that Buddha did. And they talk about the Buddha within. So I'm not here to tell you one or the other, but Christ definitely, Jesus, demonstrated this Christ within. And so it's this perfect part of us that is the divinity, and we call it the God seed. We all have the God seed in us. We all have the divine blueprint, okay? There's the ideal that we are about bringing. Even in our uniqueness, there is an energy, a vibration, a frequency that is of God that is there offered to us to move into, and that's part of our evolution as a spiritual being. And so there is that part of us that is perfect, that is immortal, that is of the Spirit of God. And it is God. It's God in us. And so, as I say, this has been recognized by sages and seers down through generations. And they've been written about. And I just want to share a couple with you about this idea of recognizing the Christ, the divinity that is in everyone. Some of you are familiar with the writings of Sri Aurobindo. And actually, there was a Harvard professor who referred to him and was quoted to say that he was one of the greatest sages of our time. And he basically was known and revered throughout all of India. And in his book, The Life Divine, he writes this. I'm just going to extract a little something here from one who represents deep advances into the spiritual awareness. He said, "That which is immortal in mortals is a God, and established inwardly as an energy working out in our divine powers. It is this vast cosmic impulse which the modern world, without quite knowing its own aim, yet serves in all its activities and labors subconsciously to fulfill." So it's saying that there is an immortal dimension in mortals, in the physical. And we may not really know that's our aim, but subconsciously we're trying and laboring to fill that, to bring it into expression. Many people who are unawakened, not seeking it yet, at different stages, don't even realize that subconsciously that's why they're here. The Bhagavad Gita is another, it's the Hindu scriptures, and there is a Upanishad that states something in the vein of which we're speaking here. And here I quote this from one of the Upanishads. Quote, "It is an eternal," this is coming in first person, states, "it is an eternal portion of me that has become the living being in the world of living beings." Let me say that again. It is an eternal portion in me that has become the living being in the world of living beings. The eye of knowledge sees the Lord abiding in the body and enjoying and going forth from it. This is talking about another dimension housed within this physical form that is the eternal portion of you beyond the physical. And the eye of knowledge sees God abiding in this body. It sees this other dimension. It identifies with it as well and enjoying it going forth. So those are just two that I offer to you of many references to this idea that there's a dimension in us that we call Christ. And the manifestation of Christ in man has remained primarily an ideal, for the last 2,000 plus years. Many of the spiritual masters have conveyed that this is an ideal that has not made itself fully known. It has not been fully realized, fully understood, and yet it exists in so many teachings down through time. So some have referred to this as the Christ vibration, if you will, in frequency, and we're to realize that there is this higher frequency going on within us that reflects the idea of oneness with God. When you are knowing your oneness with God and truly feeling it and embraced in it, and there's a whole other frequency of energy and life going through you, is how they speak of it. And this energy of oneness is called Christ. Okay, and we can ask ourselves, why did I incarnate into this body? Why did I come into this world at this time? What is this about? And the masters would say, well, you have come to realize yourself as a Christed being, as you were intended to be. Now, you may not be there yet, but that's what you are in the process of. To be in the frequency of your Christ within is to recognize this self that you are, this inner divinity that is one with your Creator. You've never left that oneness. We may not be awake and aware of it, but subconsciously we are laboring to fill that which we are held to be in the mind of God, that which is made in the image and after the likeness of God, as referred to in Genesis. And so we're trying to bring this forth now, here and now in our life, as best we can, at least make strides, and to get beyond the ego's perception of separation. Scrooge in the Dickens classic called A Christmas Carol, he represents the ego. If you remember in that story, he was blind to oneness. His heart was shut down. He was living from his ego, and then had a transformation that was beautiful and brought forth the Christ in him of greater love and a higher dimension. Herod, in the Bible story, the biblical story, also represents the ego. And if you remember, he wanted to kill the Christ child. And so he had put out an order, an edict, that all babies 2 years and younger in Bethlehem would be slain because he wanted to make sure that other king was not going to get in his way. And so you have Scrooge and Herod and the voice of ego. They all represent the perspective on life that dims the light that Christmas is intended to blossom into in you. To be reminded that you are you are a light in this world. You're intended to be a light in the world, as Jesus said. And in the Christmas story, there was a light, if you recall. There was a star and that shone, and the wise men could see it. How come Herod couldn't see it? You know, on their way to that Christ child that they were following the light to, they passed by Herod, and Herod said, oh, when you find the child, come on back, let me know where he is, because I want to fall down and worship him, which was a lie, of course, because Herod, the ego, always lies to us. Tells us we're something we're not. Tells us we're about something we're not. And it's not about love. It's not about oneness, and so forth. And so why couldn't he see it? Because that's what he was about. And so the wise men could see it, and Herod could not. And that's, again, the difference between separation and oneness. Oneness being the Christ in us, brings us into it. Now, there's some of you are familiar with Paramahansa Yogananda of the Self-Realization Fellowship. He was the founder of that. And I have a 2-volume set of commentaries that he has that is all about the teachings of Jesus. Very profound, very powerful teachings. He loved Jesus. He had a tremendous fondness for Jesus. He was of the East, but he was trying to really help humanity understand and bring together the East and the West, honoring and recognizing that the teachings of Jesus were so similar that rather than differences, there's similarities. And so I have an excerpt from the writings of those commentaries, and it goes like this. One who is body-bound, whose consciousness is limited to sensory perceptions and the thought that he is a mortal being, he cannot see God. He's like Herod. But to Jesus, who was in tune with the infinite Christ intelligence, God was no longer an unintelligible mystery. With the all-seeing intuitive perception of his soul, he could see God in any aspect, materialized out of the vibratory light, or in divine oneness embrace his Father as the formless absolute. When man has lifted his consciousness from the ordinary sensory state to receive the only begotten Christ consciousness, he shall see God, not with mortal sight, but with divine perception. And with the Christ intelligence, one sees that intelligence as the reflection of God manifesting in everything. So you get what he's saying there? That, you know, sometimes we think, if you're going to identify with yourself as just a mortal being, just a physical form, and you're not going to get into the absolute, that there's a dimension of you living inside this vehicle called a body that is divine, that is of God. As Paul said, there's a spiritual body and there's a physical body. But you're not going to get to see God truly as you're meant to see God as long as you're stuck on just physical form, thinking you're just a mortal body. And that's all you are. You have to begin to move into the other layers of consciousness where you think in terms of the formless dimension of life beyond form, okay? The form that we see in life doesn't necessarily hold perfection, and it turns people away sometimes from God because they expect it all to be perfect, but it's coming through consciousness, and that's why it has variations. So just stop and think, how would it feel to be able to finally say, I know myself, I know my worth, I know my love, I know my path, and I know I am deeply loved by my Creator. There's a sense that we are to be about beholding Christ. I behold the Christ in me, I behold the Christ in you. It's being able to see God manifesting in everything, as Paramahansa Yogananda is saying. There's a great story I love that came from Scott Peck, and it's about this idea. It's a mythical story of sorts, but it was one of his books. He didn't know where he found it, but it concerns a monastery that had fallen on hard times, and this monastery was basically decimated to the extent that there were only 5 monks left, and there was an abbot and 4 monks, and it was a dying order. The monastery was going downhill, and they had this rabbi that would sometimes visit in the woods, and so the abbot went to see the rabbi, and hoping that he might have some advice as to how to bring back life to the monastery. And so the rabbi welcomed him in, and when the abbot explained his purpose, the rabbi just said, I'm sorry, I can only commiserate with you. I don't know, you know, this is the way it is in my synagogue as well. It's the same in my town. And so they wept together, the abbot and the rabbi, and they read the Torah And anyway, it came time to leave, and they embraced, and the abbot left, and he said, you know, I've failed in my purpose for trying to get advice as to how you could help me save the order of my monastery. And the rabbi said, you know, he said, I'm sorry, I have no advice. The only thing that I can say to you is the Messiah is one of you. The Messiah is one of you. And the abbot left. When he returned, all the other monks, the 5 monks, they got together and they said, well, what did he say? What did he say? What did the rabbi say? And he said, well, he said he couldn't help us. We just wept and we read the Torah. But one thing he did say that was kind of cryptic. He said, the Messiah is one of us. I don't know what he meant by that. And so in the days and months that went by, wow, they were asking themselves, you know, well, what if it's true? I mean, one of us is the Messiah, and they pondered this, and could he have meant that, that the abbot was the Messiah? Well, he's our leader. Maybe he's the one. Of course, it could be Brother Thomas. Brother Thomas, he's a holy man. He's always been a man of the light, and certainly he could have meant Elred, except Elred is crotchety. Couldn't have meant him. He's all, surely could have meant Philip. Well, no, Philip, he's passive. He's a real nobody. But, you know, sometimes he magically appears and there to help everybody. I don't know. It could be him. Of course, the rabbi sure didn't mean me. It couldn't possibly mean me. I'm just an ordinary person. I couldn't be the Messiah. But what if he meant me? Oh, my gosh. And they contemplated this, and they pondered this. And as a result, they became so respectful, extraordinarily respectful of each other, that one might be perhaps the Messiah. And they began to be very sacred and holy and respectful of their own being in the off chance that they might be the Messiah. And this energy that they had created a dynamic and an aura that permeated the monastery, and people began to come to picnic and to play and to talk, and they brought their friends, and it was such a wonderful energy to be in. And after a couple of years, it was thriving again. And the story is a wonderful story. Why is it even there except to say something to you and me and ask the question, could it be that the Messiah is one of us? You know? And we can say yes, because the Christ is in us. Paul told us that. We all have the God seed. And when a seed is planted, the obligation of the seed is to realize itself as what it was intended to be. So you and I are a seed planted in this earth, and we have to have the obligation of growing stage by stage. You see, we are here to birth the Christ vibrations of a greater love and peace and joy that is inherent in us, to feel our connection of oneness to each other. And so as we enter into Christmas, let us not forget to bring the Christ into Christmas, because the Christ is in us. There's another dimension of us to ease on into and to feel the Holy of Holies, the sacred, the divine. God lives in you and me, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.